I was always battling, should I go in the direction of being an artist or should I go in the direction of healthcare? And as we were trying to get all the pieces together, we all of a sudden hear over the intercom of the police officer that she was alive.
Wow, what an amazing story.
She was an amazing woman.
Hey friends, Ellie Rose is our guest today, and I'm so excited to have her with us because we have been in a year-long leadership training together many moons ago, but we are just rekindling our friendship, and we're also talking about all kinds of leadership today because our leadership values align, and I'm so excited to have her. She is an artist and social gerontologist who developed the company Resilia to care for the legacies and memory health of people living with chronic and terminal illness. Her unique path started when her resilient grandmother escaped from a nursing home, and Ellie was forced to problem solve and generate alternative care solutions, different from what the industry had to offer. She's got degrees and certifications in fine art painting and sculpture, nursing, social gerontology, and leadership. She's led and operated multiple adult day health centers, memory clinics, a home healthcare agency, and a nurse training school. Welcome to Next Level Leadership. I'm your host, Dana Weaver, and I'm so happy to introduce Ellie Rose. Ellie, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Very nice. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. I got to be honest with you. I'm very curious about wanting to know more about how your grandmother escaped from the nursing home and the things you had to problem solve to get her there.
Well, I love telling the story because, it was way back at the beginning of my career. I was always battling, should I go in the direction of being an artist or should I go in the direction of healthcare? And so as I was looking at both of those, it seemed like I could only choose one. But during this experience with my grandmother, I learned that they can actually be the same path. And so, first of all, she was at a memory care facility in Wisconsin. And we had just moved her in there, my family and I did. And we went through some of the same challenges that so many families go through when their loved one is living with Alzheimer's or I'm sure any type of dementia. But, you really struggle with how do you get 24-hour care that they need at home with the current landscape of healthcare services. And so for our family, a memory care facility seemed to be the best option. But when we moved her in there, just like you and I, when I would go visit her, she would grab my arm and she would whisper Ellie, get me out of here. And, you don't know if it's, her fear as in she's not cognizant of what's going on. So she's just scared. So she's asking me to take her home. And then me communicating to her, this is a safe place. This is your home. Look at the things that are yours that you remember. They're in your space. This constant repeating, of trying to reinforce that this is a positive place to live. But meanwhile, in the back of my head, I'm I don't like this place. I'm in this place. I'm trying to tell my grandmother that this is the best. And it was. It had the most beautiful lobby. It had great positive staff. They had, an activity calendar, things to do, great meals. It seemed like all of those things were checked off the list of it being a great place. And so when I'm communicating that to her, I still don't feel good. When I was there, it didn't feel warm. It didn't feel like her home. It didn't feel like a place that my grandmother would have ever liked to live. So going through that for 1 month was stressful enough. But when we got the phone call that my grandmother was lost, meaning she was not in the LACT memory care facility, obviously then all of the memories pop off of she told me she didn't want to stay there and I didn't listen. She told our entire family to take her home. She was telling us all of these things and we just kept suppressing it because this is the trajectory of what, Alzheimer's disease path is. So, my family and I, we were in the fire station of the town we were in. And for 3 days, they looked for her. They had, helicopters with like infrared scopes going down on the ground looking for, traces of heat paths. They had volunteers going through cornfields, every different kind of whether it's a police officer or paramedics, everyone was on, alert, thought she was missing. It was on the news broadcast. At one point, the people that were going through the road, the highway that was near her facility, they found a sock of hers that was saturated with urine. And it was just such a scary thing because it was so cold outside. And to know that your loved one is lost, even though she told you that she wanted to leave. And she could be sick, she could be very cold. She's obviously not cognizant enough to take care of her, daily activities. It just, I can't even express to you how scary it was.
I'm sure.
And on the third day, there was a message that came through on the walkie-talkie of the police officer at the fire department. And we heard that they had found her and that she was deceased. And I suppose that, by the third day, we were expecting that, delivery of information because it was just so unlikely that she would have been alive from being out in the cold so long, not eating, no water, that sort of thing. It just was very unlikely. So we were very sad and we made plans to go, out to where she was in the hospital. And as we were trying to get all the pieces together, we all of a sudden hear over the intercom of the police officer that she was alive. And you could hear her in the background, she was like screaming like, hey, like, not like, hello, my name is, she was like, hey, like yelling, like, I'm here. I'm not, she was just really wanted help. So then, of course, we're very excited that she's alive. And we went to meet her at the hospital. Her body temperature was very low. My grandmother was a very prestigious woman and her hair was out to here. And so when we saw her, we said, Gram, where have you been? And she's like, oh, I went for a walk. She's like, I really don't like that place. And, listening to her, it just sunk in and into my heart that it was like, she doesn't like it. Why are we forcing her to go here? And more importantly, why doesn't she like it? What is it that she doesn't like in that place? And that really began my journey of understanding what is memory care? What is assisted living? What are these options for our family and other families? What are the care solutions? What are the pharmacological interventions and what are the non-pharmacological interventions? And so that just, those things that I was wondering just began, I'm going to figure this out and I need to make this better because nobody should have to go through what I went through with my family. Yeah. Now, just to give you the ending of the story, she did move into a different memory care facility, which was a completely different experience. It was not the fancy lobby, not the fancy bust everything that we had found in the original place, but it had what I would call the most amazing care team. This is where I learned the value of nurses and nurse leadership, their compassion that is not, it's not sappy, like it's okay, it's not bathing or infantilizing. It was compassion like, we understand, we are knowledgeable, and we are learning with you, and we want to talk to you. There was this totally different approach that I would definitely classify as leadership, but leadership in a way that they're the professionals, and we're going to be taken care of by them. And so now that she's in a different facility, she lived another 7 years there. And in those 7 years, I went to visit her frequently. I worked with her care team. I talked to the CNAs, the LPNs, the RNs, the activity people, just got to know what all of this care system is about And that's really where my leadership journey began.
Wow, what an amazing story.
Mhm. She was an amazing woman.
She has to be. I can only imagine how wonderful she was before she had dementia. So just
Yeah.
the when you said
And
she said she went for a walk and she just didn't want to go back. That really that was one of the points of the story that really stuck with me or
right.
sticks with me.
And and actually that's where the name of my company Resilia came from.
Oh,
It comes from, the word resilient, and it was her resilience. I mean, when she was in the hospital, she's like, I mean, she with her whole body, she put her hand out. I really don't like that place. I mean, I know people living with cognitive impairments might have challenges communicating, challenges expressing emotion, but there was no doubt in her mind she did not like something. So, it's just, I needed to listen. We all needed to learn how to listen and to understand what these approaches are doing to actually improve people's quality of life.
that's fantastic. How did this experience or maybe an experience down the line um, help you to want to work work in aging services and help other people? I guess not how did it, because I think it's clear in the story, but really what what happened after that, and tell us a little bit about your journey after that.
Sure. Well, it definitely wasn't a clear one. I would like to be able to tell you on this dream path, and I just followed it step by step, and now here I am today. That's not how it happened. I think when I was going into my studies, I was still feeling, I need to choose the art and creative path, or I need to choose the healthcare path. And so I started off on the art path, really because I had achieved a full tuition scholarship. So I just followed the path of least resistance. But in my first couple of years of studying, I still had this strong urge that I didn't want to just, be an artist. I wanted to apply it. I wanted to help other people. And so what then happened was I created a dual path of what is my art and then what is my applied art. And, in going through my studies with the parallel path, that's when I started to feel what I would consider being in my most natural leadership, my most authentic leadership, when you're in flow, when you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Mm. And to have that feeling, I just followed it. And so I maintained this parallel path. Now, while I was in my studies, I wasn't working in this field at all. In fact, I was working in the restaurant business, restaurant and hospitality. And I did that for 10 years. And I'll tell you, I think it actually very much contributes to the quality of my leadership today. Because you learn in the restaurant, first and foremost, as you can imagine, what is customer service. Mm-hmm. That it's not lip service. It's actually satisfying the client or the customer. How do you make people engaged? How can you keep people, satisfied and happy? What is happy? All of those things you learn in the restaurant, but also how to see things from what I call a 360 view. And so when you're in a restaurant, and I was a manager, and you're leading a team, a staff team, you then have a kitchen staff, you have the front of the house staff, the back of that. There's all these things. And then when you're in the dining room, you have to see all the customers. You have to see all the tables. You have to be aware of timing. And there's lots of noise and complications. And having all of that helped me so much when I then began working in healthcare. Because in healthcare, where I started in adult day health services. And I'll tell you, it's the funniest story how I got there. I was actually so burnt out in the restaurant business that I said, I'm done. This is my last day of work. I can no longer work this many hours because I wasn't being fed myself. And being fed meaning spiritually, emotionally. I was not receiving what I needed to be a healthy woman. So I literally Googled arts and dementia care. and was wondering what kind of jobs might exist in this field. And it's really because I was still caring for my grandmother, and I have this talent in the arts, and I wanted something in healthcare. So I Googled it, and by the graces that be, there was a job for a coordinator of a program called Art Care. And I was like, well, that is exactly what I want to do. There's a thing called Art Care. That's amazing. Yeah. And so I applied for this position, and it was at an adult day health center. And I learned all about, our industry's topics of person-centered care, what it means to work in, a system and within a program that has, alternative funding sources, private pay, all of these things I started to learn. And I loved it so much. I was so hungry for it because finally I had what I would call the canvas that I could start painting the art and care, the art and dementia care, the art and whatever kind of nursing care. I now had this canvas that I could start to pave a path that didn't exist, that I knew was needed. And so that's where that all started, was right in adult day. And I had a great mentor. I have to tell you that that current director at that time, who was my most inspiring leader to this day, really took me under her wing and taught me the ins and outs. And more so, the reason I value her leadership is that she was so inspiring for me to develop an idea that doesn't exist and to prove it, and then find ways to get it to work within our current system that could then help change and improve the system. So that was where it started, was right there in adult day.
Wow, that's an amazing story. How do you show up now as a leader as a result of this woman taking you under her wing and giving you really the power to take your creative knowledge and apply it, but also create things that just were never there before?
I would say there was a lot of support of trial and error, which would be the best way to say it. But to use the day center, it's an enclosed space, and I could try things, and I knew that she was supportive of innovation. Now, it doesn't mean I got to run free and try all the things I wanted. It meant that I would have an idea and I could talk about it with our team and think about a solution and get feedback. And feedback was huge. Learning how to ask for it, that you don't just sit there and wait for feedback to come. When you're developing something, you really want to put it out there, and the value of someone giving you feedback is really, priceless, because you have a choice of whether you think that's true or not, or why you think it's true or not. There's so many more decisions you can make when you ask for feedback. So I think that was really supportive. And that's when I started, you throw it up on the wall. If I tried 20 things and 2 things were successful, those are 2 more things than I had before I started. So it was really, let's try it. Let's try it. Let's not necessarily feel the handcuffs and the barriers of regulation and the way it's always been done. And this is the way that management wants it. To stop looking at those things. And I didn't want to, go against what was in existence. I wanted to do the same thing that I was doing with my career, that I wanted it to be on this parallel path. Mm-hmm. So, what she taught me most was that you can't be against or opposed to the current system, that I needed to be with it. And when I learned how to be with it, then I could start to connect and then be independent as needed. I could connect to the system and then be independent. And that ebb and flow is really something that I think has been an asset to me as I've continued this journey to be a leader in the field of healthcare, but specifically in senior care. One other thing I was going to say about that is, I guess I would say that the arts in general, the encouragement of the arts and my creativity has always put me in a different bracket where, if somebody didn't like what I was doing, there was always, well, she's an artist. And when I first started, I actually never took offense to that, because somehow I was like, okay, great. Blame it on that while I try to improve the healthcare system, right? So, I always really valued that there was this, they didn't quite know how to digest me. Like, is she an artist or is she a healthcare professional? Is she a clinician? What's going on there? So nonetheless, I think the arts have always helped me throughout my journey of getting stronger. But certainly after my experience in adult day, I went on to get my master's degree in applied gerontology and social gerontology. And with that kind of support behind me, I really felt that I had the strength in both intelligence and experience to start moving and paving my own path. But certainly I did hit a point, Dana, which I know you and I have talked about this, and I've talked about it with many other colleagues. There's this point where I got so, I think tired is not quite the right word, but I definitely felt the wear and tear on trying to work within the system all the time, and specifically underneath leadership that had a narrow vision for what dementia care could be, what caring for our legacies could be, with this narrow focus. And that's ultimately what pushed me to go out on my own and to be a strong enough leader to lead my own interventions instead of working within somebody else's system. So I learned that all throughout those first few years, and that's kind of what's led me to where I am today.
Oh, wow. That's a fantastic story. And whoever's listening to this is definitely taking pieces of this with them, or should be taking pieces of this with them, because I love the picture that you painted for us of connecting with the system and then going out on your own and learning something and then reconnecting. And then it comes almost full circle to talking about how you got frustrated and overwhelmed and just tired of the leaders above you that could only see the narrow focus. What advice would you have? Because there's a lot of leaders that still feel that way today. They're still operating that way. And, we come by it honestly in some cases. You got to play with the system. And if you learn how to play within the system, you should be fine. But as we were saying earlier, we kind of want to disrupt the systems that are there now so that we can find new paths forward. What advice would you have for the leaders that are there now that they may not even realize that they only see a narrow path, but to help them see a different picture or see a different possibility for the future of aging?
That's a great question. I think the advice I would give is kind of twofold. The first is some advice that a leader very close to me now has said. And that piece of advice is that you can't be all things to all people. And I offer that because I'm reminded of it almost daily, that in order to make true change, and by change, I mean an elevation from where we are to where we want to be. Not change like we're going to change every system. We're going to change the protocols and the procedures. We're going to change. I'm not talking about that type of change. I'm talking about elevating our current position. And that if we can focus on the one thing or the two things that we are really good at in this moment, doesn't mean it's the only thing we're good at forever. It's like in this moment, if we elevate something and can communicate the quality of that elevation, and we get half of the people to understand and get on board with it, the other half that doesn't, it doesn't mean that what you created isn't positive or isn't a success. Getting 100% of the people on board does not indicate that you're good, right? That you're successful. It's that it needs to be good for the people that it needs to be good for. So when I was in my leadership journey of doing product development for caregivers in home care, applying this thought that I'm going to create this product just for caregivers. But there's all this pressure, like it needs to serve this massive amount of people, and we need to change all of this. We need to change home care activities. It just got so overwhelming that I would just stop. And, you're dead in the water when you don't take things apart. And so when I look at improving and elevating the quality of activities in home care, that's a big umbrella, right? We're talking about years, decades of home care operations. To try and change that, that is not going to be successful for me as a leader. So what I did was in my adult day center, I then stepped off and looked at what home care was doing and found a unified solution where a family has a 24-hour solution with adult day and with home care. And, I could talk to you for an hour about this model, but what I most want to share with you is that I had to look at what the second part that I want to talk to you about. I had to look at what the requirements were and stop looking at them as handcuffs and barriers, and instead look at them as assets for what I'm going to use to build the new protocol that I want. So, for example, in our CMS regulations, it says that we must provide person-centered activities. And then it shows you ways that you can do that. But we have to, prove and provide evidence that we are providing person-centered activities. Well, when I read that, I was like, whoa, this is a requirement. Okay, I'm going to use that. And now I'm going to develop all of the different ways you can provide evidence of person-centered care. And I'm going to do it in an easy way, right? So I would say you can't be all things to all people. Focus on a smaller bite instead of that big picture, but also use the protocols, procedures, regulation, use them, find the part that can be the stepping stone, that asset to help launch what you're doing instead of being a resistance.
That's fantastic. What great advice. What, are there any questions that you wish I would have asked you today? Well, because we're getting to the wrap-up point of our interview, and I could just listen to you all day. But is there anything you wish I would have asked you?
I would say, I don't know if there's anything that I wish, but if there's something else to share, it's really about, I wish I could have someone younger than me to really sculpt into a leader that I now have become and I wish for other people. But the idea of leadership, I think, can get really numbed down and can be used over and over. So when we say leadership today, we don't really understand what that true meaning is. Yeah. And I think, from the learning I had that I went through at leading age and with all of my experience in different healthcare systems, different agencies, different organizations, is that what I needed to be my most authentic self. And I needed to learn what leadership was for Ellie and really how that impacts people. I spent a lot of time working in Mexico City, Mexico over the last 7 years. And from there, I've learned so much about it doesn't matter what language you speak or your cultural background. The arts have an amazing way of being a communicator within culture and language. And, we have cultures in healthcare systems, we have cultures in countries. But when we look at culture and the culture of organizations, I want to inspire people to consider the arts as a method of how we engage people, because it doesn't matter what kind of cognitive impairment you may or may not have, what kind of terminal illness you may be struggling with, or if you're a staff person or an executive leader, that we are not above and under people. When we're doing the arts, we're actually in this very balanced place. I know as much as you know. And so when we can use the arts as a vehicle for learning, that's how I always got all of my nurses in home care, all of the nurses in memory clinics, all of the executive leaders to get on board with ideas. It's about looking at the arts as a method for how we communicate with each other. And I think that's what makes Resilia different. We're not trying to be all things to all people. We have a very specific strategy for non-pharmacological approaches, therapeutic arts methods, proven results in our evaluations. Those things are what's making Resilia, different in such a large marketplace of senior care. We're in this very specific niche of how to do non-pharmacological and therapeutic arts approaches in parallel with the healthcare system. Not opposing, not there and out. We are now parallel. So yeah, I would just offer that.
Is there anything more you want? Well, let me ask this. As people are listening to you, they've got to be wanting to know more about Resilia. Tell us a little bit more about Resilia and how they can get a hold of you.
Sure. You can reach us online, of course, at resilialife.com. And a Resilia Life is what we like to think of as a resilient life. So resilialife.com is our website. And there you can see a little bit about our story. You can hear the story of my grandmother through an animation reel. And you can see all the products that we're currently working on. We have a great new product out called Legacy Chronicles, which is a fantastic kit that you can purchase and get in the mail. And it has over 70 different activities that I have proven time and again to be successful. And so that product is on there first and foremost. You can check that out. But certainly my email is there and my phone number. I would love to hear from any one of you that is listening to this today, whether it's about leadership or how to improve and elevate your care strategies with the arts. Any of those conversations are fully welcome.
Fantastic. I'll definitely put that information in the show notes too, so that people will have it as they're watching this. So Ellie, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and your creativity. Yes, it's good to see you too. Any parting words?
You. No, just be real. Be authentic leaders and find your way.
Fantastic. So for our audience, I'm sure that you took a ton away today. And if you found any part of this helpful or informative, we would both love it if you would share it with your friends or your colleagues so that other people can learn a little bit about it, learn a little bit about leadership, learn about Resilia, and find our way through healthcare in a way that really honors our older people. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, see you later.